Yeah, okay. If you're a Mercedes purist, or if you're a faint of heart, just look away. All right, so I got the die grinder out with just a little abrasive disc on it. Nothing really bad aggressive. And well, on this side, I got the flap disc on the angle grinder, and this was pretty heavily rusted. I got most of that scale off of there. This is not really that important, but you know, just keep some of the rust off of it. We'll probably put a coat of black paint on it too to minimize corrosion. And got the flap disc on this side as well. Just cleaned it up again, and we'll probably tape this area off and just put a coat of black paint on there to keep the rust down. Nobody will ever see it, but anyway. And then on these areas where the bearing race resides, there's a lot of rust in there. I've got some 1500 grit 3M paper here, and just put a little PB blaster on it as a lubricant, you know, and you don't want to damage the surface. This is just what I had laying around the shop, you know. And I'm going to clean up this area here where the crush washer resides and the inner bearing. That's, you know, just to straighten it up, just to clean it up just a little bit. It's not really that crucial. Of course, we'll clean this really good with brake clean and get all the little bits off of it, so you don't want any garbage floating around inside your bearings. And I touched the end of this thing up a little bit with the with this abrasive disc on the die grinder as well, just to deburr that, where a certain ham-fisted shade tree mechanic caused a little issue there. Pretty much done getting the rust off of these areas. I don't feel any grooves or deep scratches or anything like that. This feels really good to me. Up next, I'm going to go ahead and do a final cleaning on this before we start to install our new bearings. All right, so I'm playing around here trying to figure out the best way to press this new bearing on. I don't really want to use my cheap Harbor Freight press over there in the corner of the room. It's just crap. So I thought maybe I would finally put this tool to work. I've got a CTA model 8650 wheel bearing and hub removal and installation kit. So I've got it positioned on here like this. I got this a ring out of the tool. And then of course this bar spans across that right there. Got a big threaded shaft that goes all the way through the thing. Kind of using the tool backwards, or I'm going to rather. Kind of piecemealing together what I have here. Trying to use what I have. Also got the big pipe I used, or didn't use rather. I tried to use earlier in the last video. You may recall, I actually told you that I used this to install bearings on another car. Come to find out, this pipe fits the old bearing pretty well. I think we're going to use this to press. This is the old bearing. So what I'm going to do is, remember what I told you about bearing races? We're going to use them. They're good tools. I'm going to cut the cage off this old bearing, and I'm going to use this race. I'll put the new bearing over the shaft. We'll take the old race, put it over the top of the new bearing, and then I took a measurement. I grabbed this piece out of that kit I just showed you. I'm going to put that there like that, and I've got a thrust nut that you put over the top of this thing. You know, you clinch the two together with that, but we're going to cut a 3-inch portion of pipe. So then we'll have the new bearing, the old bearing race on top of that, a 3-inch section of pipe, and then this thing, and then the thrust nut on top. Put a wrench on the bottom, a wrench on that, tighten the two, and we'll push the bearing onto the flange. That's the plan. So stick around, folks. You can't get minute-by-minute jam-pack excitement like this just anywhere, you know. All right, we've got our tool cleaned up. I trued the edges up on the side of my bench grinder. I've done that before. Take a look at the exit clip of every one of my videos, and you'll see the technique. This is just a carpenter's square. And again, this is not a precision part. It's just a tool for pounding stuff. But you need to be, you know, fairly precise, you know, because you are driving a bearing into something. So, you know, eyeballing with a Sawzall and then truing it up on a a bench grinder. That's good enough for our purposes, I think. And besides, we got a nice little tool now. All right, I think I got a strategy finally. This is the, I clipped the cage off of the old bearing. We'll use this part here, the narrow bit, and we'll slip that down there like that. See, the pipe doesn't go, it's too big to get around that. If we had a different piece of pipe, it would work, but we don't, so anyway. So now we have an old bearing race that I kept around the shop. That fits on there pretty good. And then we're going to see, I have another one here, another old one, and we'll place that kind of upside down. It fits perfectly. And now we have a surface on which we can place our pipe. And I believe we should be able to use that scenario to press the new bearing on. We'll come in here like that. And then we'll have our thrust nut on top. And I believe that should work. Now we'll go nice and slow, and just to make sure that we don't screw anything up. All right, we're back. Trying to straighten up my little area here and get ready to install a new bearing on our old axle flange here. And she's got a coat of paint. So let's go ahead and get this thing ready. And we got everything cleaned up pretty well. Got the surfaces cleaned up here pretty well. All right, so I had a question in the last video of which bearings do you think I should use for the project? And I think I've made up my mind. We're going to go with Timken. This pairing, this is the outer, and this is made in France. I've installed Timken bearings on cars in the past on numerous occasions, and I've never had any problems with them. The Truck Tech bearing may last forever. I don't know. I'm going to keep that Truck Tech bearing set as a spare, but I'll use the other parts out of the Truck Tech kit, namely the thrust washer and the compression sleeve. Also, I've got Timken seals as well. So I'm going to go ahead and use the Rock Auto stuff. And it was about 50-50. About 50% of you guys said, to hell with it, just use the Truck Tech. And, the other half said, yeah, you should use Timken. And some of you said, oh, I only use Mercedes. Well, that's fine too. I can't find Mercedes. They're all on back order. Everybody's on back order. I was lucky to find this stuff. So up next, we're going to go ahead and load up our bearing with some nice bearing grease here. I got Valvoline. I like that brand. Works pretty well. And then we'll go ahead and install this bearing on the axle flange. I got all my tools here ready. It's kind of like a cooking show, I'm sure you guys know how to do this, but, maybe somebody out there doesn't know how to do it. Let's see, how do you do this? There we go. Just put a blob in your hand, and you want to mash it in that side, and when you see it come out that side, you know it's loaded up. And you got to do that all the way around. See it start to bubble up right there. All right, we're going to load this bearing up, and then we'll get ready to put it on. All right, we've got her loaded up there. And let's go ahead and set up our little makeshift press situation here, if I can remember how. We need, where's it at? We need that. There we go. Let's see, what do we need now? I need a bearing. Hey, that's a good idea. There we go. And cover that up. We don't want to get dust in our grease. Set that aside. You don't want to be stirring up any dust either, when you're doing this. You want it to be, clean. You don't want stuff getting in there. All that's going to do is run around in there and destroy your bearings, and they'll last, 6 months or something, Up next, to press the bearing on, we're going to use the old bearing race, turn it upside down. In reality, we could probably just take a hammer and tap on this thing all the way around and install the bearing that way. That would probably work okay. But I'm going to do it this way just for the heck of it. I think really what this is about is, hey, you know what? There's more than one way to skin a cat. If you don't have the official, there's an official bearing installation tool that you can buy for this, and that's perfectly fine if you have that, or if you want to spend the money on it, hey, go right ahead. I am just going to do it this way. Yep, see, the pipe won't go down past that one big section there, so that's the reason why we need some added height here. So I got 2 old bearing races. I'm going to put them just like so. And I've got my pipe here, and then I've got my my pressing doohickey. We'll call it a doohickey, just for lack of a better word. I guess this is called a thrust nut installed. And we moved you down there to, just give you a better shot. I may have to get the impact on this. It's kind of precarious, actually. Yeah, that seems to be working. Yeah, we're getting on down there. Now you're not going to see, that gap right there, because there's a chamfer in there, right? You're not going to see that, go completely away. There's going to be a little gap there. So we got to figure out, when this thing hits bottom. I think we hit bottom. Your tone changes, you know what I'm saying? There we go, our homemade pipe and 2 bearing races that we had laying around the shop and the bearing race that's stuck to the shaft. That's outstanding. Okay, well, let's relax. We got the race from the old bearing stuck on there. Just a wee bit. Tap on the old race to, there we go. See, it wasn't even, just barely. But there we are. Got a brand new Timken, made in France, tapered roller bearing installed on our Mercedes W126 axle flange. All right, so we're going to have to address the gorilla in the room here. Show you what I mean. So here's the new race from Timken. And normally you'd have to press this in, right? But in our case, it's not so much. Okay, so clearly what's happened here is the bearing wore out and it spun the race, and it wore the inside of the wheel carrier out a little bit. There is a fix for this. The absolute perfect 100% fix is buy a new wheel carrier and replace it. Fine. Fine. I don't know what a new one costs. Probably a lot. A salvage part would probably be the best course of action. But there is a fix for this type of thing. And you can use staking, which I know some guys are probably cringing right now. Basically, staking, what staking is, you take a center punch with a point and you make dimples, symmetrically, do 90 here, 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 here on the inside, and you hammer out a little hole, and it takes the metal on either side of the hole and pokes it up some. And you could probably put, I don't know, 8. You could go, 45 degrees all the way around, and that would probably suffice. And then that would cause this to have a press fit again, right? But that wouldn't last. Now, there are products called retaining compounds. Loctite company makes a whole range of them. And what you need to do is determine the gap that you want to fill before you purchase the correct compound. I don't know how crucial it is to purchase, the spot-on correct compound, because they have a range of work that they can support. Certain compounds say, well, I'm only good up to 0.005, or I'm good up to point whatever. The gaps that we're dealing with here are in thousandths. My feeler gauge is out, so the gap is all the way around, right? So how much is it? I don't know. So I'm going to take one side, I'm going to pull it down, and I've got a 5/1000 gauge, and I'm just going to try to put the corner of it in, because this is a little wide, but it is flexible, but it's a little wide, so, but it's got a little corner, so I'm going to try that. Nope, that won't go in. All right, how about 4 thousandths? And again, I'm pulling this down to try to make the gap at the top at one side a little bigger, right? 4 won't go in. 3, nope, that 3 won't go in. I'm almost out of feeler gauges, folks. All right, this is 2.5 thousandths, 0.0025. All right, that one goes in. Look at there. So we've got a gap on one side. Now, I'm pulling down. If I try to put it in here, it won't go, right? Because I'm pulling it down. If I'm going directly across from where I'm pulling it, so if I take that same analogy and go up top and see if it follows suit, yeah, it does. So that's actually kind of fascinating. So that means we have 2.5 thousandths of a gap on one side, but clearly it has to be symmetrical, right? So your gap really is all the way around this divided by 2, which would be 1.25 thousandths. And that will be our gap all the way around. Anyway, so now what we're going to do is go off and try to find some sort of retaining compound that, after we stake this, we'll then come in here probably with some sort of a primer to make sure our retaining compound adheres to the metal. And then we'll put the retaining compound all the way around it. And then we'll drive this in with the bearing race. All right, that's the plan that I've developed to fix our little problem here. So I need to do a little more research, and then we'll hopefully finish this job up. All right, we're back. It's been a couple of days. Been waiting on some stuff to come in the mail. Got ourselves a center tap punch, little hammer, and we're going to stake the inside of the bore with that. After we're done with that, we're going to apply Loctite N primer. Primer N, SF7649. A little pump sprayer. We'll spray that in there to prime the area. Promotes adhesion of the retaining compound that we will be using for this job, and that is Loctite 660. It's a very viscous material, kind of a paste, and this is used in the machinist's world to repair worn bearing races, worn bearing race bores, worn shafts and things like that that have bearings pressed onto them in situations where you have rotating assemblies in work situations, you know, running 24/7. So this is a very common repair for this type of situation. Again, the alternative is replace the entire wheel carrier assembly, but we're not going to do that. We're going to repair it. So now let's go ahead and stake the interior of our wheel carrier bore. We're going to try to do this in a symmetrical pattern. Yeah, okay. If you're a Mercedes purist, or if you're a faint of heart, just look away. Fairly significant damage. Just kidding. So, you know, no harm done. If it doesn't work, we'll just buy a new wheel carrier assembly, you know. I'm thinking that's probably going to do just fine. Let's go ahead and apply our primer next. By the way, the Loctite 660 retaining compound can be used with either the primer N, which I have here, or the primer T. The primer T, the shipping time on it was a little longer, so I just opted for the N since it could use either one and I could get this one right away. So that's why I chose that, as simple as that. So let's see how this goes. Let me do a test spray over there out in the air. There we go. And there we go. I would say that's probably good enough. It is teal in color, greenish bluish. All right, let's go ahead and clip off the tip of our retaining compound. And I would think a single bead around the periphery of the bore will be more than sufficient. So I'm going to need to, oh, you know what? It said to shake this stuff. Let's do that. Not that that matters a whole lot. We'll squeeze it around some. In the instructions it said that there was, they didn't fill it all the way up, mostly to make more money, I would suspect, but their excuse was that it allows it to maintain, you know, it keeps it from drying out, basically. Well, come on, is there some in there? Goodness gracious. Okay, it's just pretty thick. I guess, oh, I think maybe that's what that's for. It's kind of like squeezing out toothpaste. Yeah, that's the way to do it. We'll do it that way. It pays to know what you're doing. So the other forms of retaining compound by Loctite have a viscosity which is a lot lower. The viscosity on this one is, if you look at viscosity charts, it's around 250,000. What that means is basically like, you know, like a paste. It's like caulking compound or something. All right, that should do us nicely. We'll put that back on there. Now we're ready to install our new bearing. So come to find out, pretty much none of the bearing kits I bought from Harbor Freight were worth anything, and they don't fit this car. So we're going to go for the old-fashioned way of installing the bearing. I've got the new race right here. We don't want to waste any time dilly-dallying around with our stuff because we need to get it installed. We don't want our stuff hardening on us. So what we're going to do is use the tried and true way of an old race, but I'm going to use one of these things out of my other kit to place over the top of it. Actually, that's more trouble than it's worth. All right, I think we're getting there. And of course, your sound will change when you bottom out. I think we're there. I'm just doing a light. I know it sounds terrible, but I'm just doing a very light tap. Let me wipe off that excess retaining compound, and then we'll take a look and see what we have here. Now I'm looking at the back side of the bearing race that we just tapped into place just to see if I see any glaring problems. I don't see any issues. All right, we're going to let that dry for a few hours, then we'll carry on with the rest of our installation. All right, so the outer seals we have here from L-Ring. I'm not sure how that's pronounced, but looks like a German part, so that's pretty cool. I wasn't able to get these from Timken, so I went and got them from FCP Euro, and this is the brand they had, and this is, you can just tell by looking at it that it's really nice. So up next, we're going to go ahead and coat the exterior of the wheel carrier housing there with a little bit of Permatex Ultra Gray, which is my standard sealant of choice for things in general. The Rhinza seal is good as well, but I don't have any, and I have to order it. And I can get this right up the street at the parts house. Tappy tap tap. The instructions say to use there's a puller tool for this, but I don't have that. So, but I do have this handy big steel plate from that other kit that I keep using parts from. And that's a real common problem for installing grease seals in this particular fashion. A grease seal's real bad about cocking off to one side on you. Got to go all the way down to the chamfer. Let's wipe off our squeeze out. That spring is in my way, I'm telling you. You know, you think putting a grease seal in, oh, that's no big deal. Let me tell you something, putting a grease seal in is finicky. Because for one thing, they're flimsy, you know. They're not stiff like a bearing race or some other thing. One wrong move and you're buying another grease seal. Ask me how I know. All right, I think we're all the way down. I'm gonna go ahead and clean up the squeeze out here and then we'll move on to the next step. So for the inner wheel bearing race, I went ahead and tapped it into position in a similar fashion to the outer. Following the service manual, next step is to lube up your races. I've done that inside and out. We also need to put some fresh grease in the cavity inside the wheel carrier. Factory service manual says put grease in the cavity. You don't want to go hog wild here, folks. All right, we're all lubed up. Up next, we're going to go ahead and pack the inner bearing. We're going to install the crush sleeve on the flange, insert the flange into the housing, and we'll put the new inner bearing on, and we'll press that on. That'll be the next few steps that we follow here. All right, we're sitting over here at the bench trying to strategize about how to install this inner bearing. So here's the new bearing from Timken, and the outer one is already pressed on, as you know. Here is the new crush sleeve. It just slips over the flange shaft like that, and we'll introduce this into the wheel carrier. Of course, we'll have this bearing packed, and we'll place it on there like that. I went ahead and cut the cage off of the old inner bearing. We'll use that as our press tool, and then we'll utilize one of these doohickeys from my kit, and we're going to use the threaded shaft from the tool and the thrust nut. This thing, the threaded shaft will come out here, the thrust nut will go on the back like that, and then on the other side I've got a plate with a hole in it, the proper size for this to pull against. So that whole scenario is how we're going to draw the inner bearing onto the axle flange. We'll get this far enough down to where we can insert the sealing ring, thread the slotted nut on. Comically, the grease seal that we're going to use is from the Truck Tech kit because it is the proper size, and I was just noticing that the grease seal that I got from Timken from Rock Auto was completely wrong. So I'll have to return it. So the inner seal I'm going to use from the Truck Tech kit. All right, so that's the basic plan for how we're going to get this flange reinserted into the wheel carrier and the inner bearings pressed on. So, all right, so let me button all this up. I'll go ahead and pack this bearing off camera, and then we'll move back over to the car and finish up. All right, it's the next day, and it's time to get back to work. Our Loctite 660 has been curing now for, I'm not sure how long, something less than 20 hours. I'm going to call it good. We're going to go ahead and put the axle flange in now and press in the inner bearing. I got my stuff here. I have a little shelf here below the camera. Slip this guy up in there. There we go. You can feel it slip past that outer seal, the rubber. You can see it, part of the flange sitting there, ready to receive its bearing. There we go. This might be a little precarious. What happens if I just... There's nothing holding that, folks. There's nothing to keep that up there. It would be, let's see, how much thread action we got going on there. All right, let's get our instruments of construction in order here. There we go. All right, we got something to hold that in there now. Look, wouldn't you know it? I left my thrust nut over here on the workbench. Somewhere. All right, I found my thrust nut right where I left it. All right, let's get our inspecting spectacles on, position our tools appropriately. We're going to get that old bearing race positioned to press on the inner part of the new bearing. All right, so using a 2 wrenches by hand is really precarious and things move around too much. So we're going to go for 1 wrench and 1 impact driver. You know, I can hold this thing straight with my right hand and I can use the impact to drive it on with the other. And I got the tool on low here. All right, we got her in there. That's what that looks like. Still need to put the sealing ring on and the slotted nut and the grease seal. All right, so up next, I'm gonna go ahead and get the dial indicator out and get that set up, and then we'll tighten this thing down to within our specification. All right, we're getting set up here to finalize this job. You have to put the inner grease seal on first, and then you insert the sealing ring or thrust washer, as it were, and then you screw on the slotted nut and tighten it down according to the spec, which is 0.04 to 0.06 millimeters, or about 1.5 thousandths to around 2.4 or 5 thousandths, ballpark. So what I'm going to do is add a little grease between the grease seal and the back side of the bearing. Probably not necessary. I'm not adding a lot, I'm just, you know, making sure we got some in there, you know. According to the manual, we're also supposed to put some grease down in this groove inside the seal. One last step before we put the inner grease seal in is to apply a little bit of sealing compound, aka Permatex Ultra Gray, to the exterior of the grease seal. And I don't want to press any of this sealant into the housing, so I'm going to stay away from that inside edge. But it's not like Permatex is made out of sand or gravel. I would imagine if a little bit got in there, it wouldn't hurt anything. However, it does need to be square, Harris. You know, that's important too. Okay, got it about as straight as I can get it. Tappy tap tap. I just love this parking cable. This parking brake cable. It's so convenient. Remember what I said about seals? You just, you know, you got to go easy with these things. I got it a little crooked and I need to straighten it up. I think we're working. Yeah, that's working out. All right, we got her in there straight, folks. No need for applause, really. I do this a lot. All right, so you want the rubber to be flush with the exterior of the housing. You don't want it down in there too far, you know? I think we're good, really. All right, that's what that looks like. There's the new grease seal. Now we're going to put the sealing ring in and the lock nut. All right, so the reason why you need to put the grease seal in first is this thrust washer, basically the side of it seals against the inside rail of this grease seal. So if you put this in first, you couldn't get the seal in, pretty much. So that just slips in there and the grease seal just kind of expands a little bit and accepts it. And we put our nut on. So far, so good. All right, we're going to go ahead and start to tighten our slotted nut now. I'm just going to start off by snugging it up, you know, just by feel, really. And then we'll put the dial gauge on it and, you know, see where we're at. Yeah, that's starting to tighten up. already. No crunchies though. Well, it's nice and quiet. Yeah, I don't know how much play we got, but it's a little too much. All right, so let me go ahead and lower the car a little bit and we'll get our dial indicator set up and we'll get a couple of pipes here. Maybe we can do this by hand. Probably not. We may have to lower it back down to the ground and redeploy the floor jack to help us out. All right, we got our dial indicator set up here, and the spec is basically 1.5 to around 2.5 thousandths, or 0.04 to 0.06 millimeter. And right now, we're looking at, let's see, that's on about 26, the meter's on about 26, so if I go inward, so back to the 0 mark, so we're at 26 thousandths. By golly, I think we've got quite a ways to go. So I'm going to try to tighten this thing up off camera and see where we go with that. I'll be right back. We got a little closer. I'll explain to you what I did. So we go in all the way up around 0, and then we're like 15 thousandths out. Need to go to about 2, really. I cut a piece of pipe about 20 inches long and put it right here, and I wedged it against the bottom side of the lift. And I put another piece of pipe on my ratchet and I tightened it that way. I got a 3-foot pipe down over here so I get a lot of leverage. I moved it a little bit. I think I might try that one more time, and then we'll probably end up lowering the car and using the floor jack. So we'll be right back. All right, I think you can see what we've got going on here. Got the flange tool on the jack, and I've got a dial indicator on the exterior of the whole affair. And we've got the cheapest 1/2-inch ratchet I could find wedged against the rear trailing arm. So when we raise the jack, we should be able to tighten up that slotted nut back there. There's just not enough room to turn the slotted nut, so we're going to turn on the outside. Here we go. Folks, I think we're done finally. I broke my other El Cheapo dial indicator, which really was a blessing in disguise. Went and found this Fowler branded one at NAPA. It's made in China unit, but I think it's still pretty good quality. Got a nice heavy duty magnetic mount and nice rigid posts to facilitate accurate measurements. So let me set you down on the tripod and show you what we have here. All right, I got the meter. Basically, it's set on 30 there, which is meaningless in and upon itself, but just wanted to show you what the play looks like now. So we're going to push in, goes up to, or down to 28.5. That's 1/1000th and a half, and out to 31, so that's 2.5 thousandths really. Then we're going to pivot it up and down, kind of like at an angle. I'm not seeing a whole lot. Right there, I'm only seeing about 2 thousandths. Well, anyway, bottom line is we're in there. We're right in there. So the spec is 0.04 to 0.06 millimeters, which is analogous to around 1.5 thousandths up to around 2.6 thousandths, something like that. So, and I can no longer hear a clunk when I do this in and out like that. I just feel the slightest movement. There we go. I think we're all in there, folks. Had to go off this morning and buy myself a new gauge because I broke the other one. And all I needed was one more turn of the jack, and we got our spec nailed down. So as I stated earlier, what you're going to do is put your good quality 1/2" ratchet tie wrapped down to the rear trailing arm in the tightening position, obviously. So, and then you get your flange tool, homemade, and you position it like this. Put the end on the jack, and then jack up out there, and jack her up, let her down, let it ratchet back down, jack her up, let it ratchet back down. And every once in a while you want to come in here and check your dial indicator until you reach the specified range, which is 0.04 to 0.06 millimeters. All right, there you go. There's your basic process. So let me go ahead and button this car up and take it on a test drive. All right, well, without too much weeping and gnashing of teeth, we were able to coax that axle back into the wheel carrier and get it nestled into its axle flange. So let's get this gnarly looking wire down from here that we were using. And I've got the inner bolt tightened up as well. Put the brake rotor back on, put the brake caliper back on, put the wheel back on. We're done. We're going to go for a test drive. All right, so all that stuff's pretty mundane. Next thing you're going to see is some road action. So stay tuned. Well, all right, we're out and about on our little test drive. By golly, I wasn't going to let this job go until we were done. So yes, it's night and I just finished. It's about 8 o'clock. So all I'm hearing is a diesel engine, the pleasant whir of the 722.3 transmission, which, as you know, has a slight whine to it. And don't tell me yours doesn't. And no wheel bearing noise. That's pretty nice. Consequently, the Turbo 400 in my Cadillac has a nice reassuring whine as well. So do a little, all right, there we go. Just a moderate takeoff there on the next road. All I hear is road noise, folks. I think we got her licked. So I appreciate you guys stopping by the channel. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And if you'd like to be notified whenever I release a new video, don't forget to click that little bell down below. You guys have a good one, and remember to enjoy driving your classic Mercedes.